Marlene's Diner sat on the edge of Frost Valley, a small place where locals warmed their hands over coffee while the winter wind scraped along the windows. On this quiet morning, Ethan Walker, a 40-year-old former Navy SEAL, was finishing his breakfast with Ranger, his black and tan German Shepherd service dog, resting at his feet. The diner door suddenly slammed open, blasting a wave of icy air inside. A boy, no more than 8, stumbled across the threshold. His thin jacket was soaked, his face streaked with tears and dirt. His red hands shook violently. "Please, help my mom," the boy cried, voice cracking in terror. "He's hurting her!" The diner fell silent. Forks stopped mid-air. Even the old jukebox seemed to choke on its own static. Ethan Walker stood immediately, Ranger rising beside him like a loaded spring. "Show me where," Ethan said, steady and serious. The boy pointed toward the Snowcrest Motel across the street, a place no one wanted to go unless they had no other choice. Before we follow what happens next, share this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The cry in the winter of Frost Valley. Snow drifted across Frost Valley in slow, heavy waves, softening every rooftop and burying every sound beneath a muted hush. Inside Marlene's Diner, the morning felt warmer than it had any right to be. The place was small, its wooden panels worn from decades of boots, laughter, and spilled coffee. A row of yellow lights buzzed gently above the counter, giving the entire room a tired but welcoming glow. At the far booth, Ethan Walker sat with his back to the wall, a habit formed not by preference but by years of necessity. He was around 40, tall and broad-shouldered, with a frame shaped by endless drills, long deployments, and the kind of discipline that didn't fade after leaving the Navy SEALs. His face carried the traces of rough winters and tougher memories: angular jaw, straight nose, a slightly high forehead, and a beard trimmed neat along his jawline. A few silver strands glinted at his temples, the sort earned through battles no one saw. His eyes were deep brown, warm when at rest, sharp when focused. Today they held a quiet steadiness as he watched the snow outside. Ethan rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying. Life had taught him restraint after he had lost teammates in a mission gone sideways years earlier. He carried that guilt with him, tucked behind his calm expressions like a scar no one could see. He wore his only winter outfit, a navy blue coat stretching to mid-thigh, a red and black flannel shirt beneath it, faded jeans, and brown leather boots dusted with melted snow. His left leg stiffened every time he shifted, a lingering pain from a blast that had taken down a wall and nearly taken him with it. Beside his boot, resting neatly like a soldier awaiting command, lay Ranger. Ranger was a 5-year-old German Shepherd, muscular and steady, his black and tan coat glossy even in the muted diner light. His ears stood tall, always listening. His amber-brown eyes tracked each movement in the room with the calm intelligence of a creature trained to think before acting. He wore a black harness labeled in bold white letters: "Service dog, do not pet." Like Ethan, Ranger didn't make noise unless he had to. They matched each other's silence the way longtime partners do, without effort. Around them, the diner moved slowly. A middle-aged waitress named Marlene, short and wide-hipped, with curls fading from blonde to gray, poured coffee with the gentle patience of someone who had served travelers her entire life. 2 truck drivers chatted over scrambled eggs. An elderly man read a newspaper with shaking hands, ordinary people living an ordinary morning. Then the door slammed open. A gust of icy air whipped through the diner, scattering napkins and rattling the bell above the frame. Everyone turned. A small boy stumbled inside. He looked no older than 8. His hair was light brown, messy, and clumped from melting snow. His cheeks were flushed red from cold and tears. His coat, too thin for winter, hung crooked on his narrow shoulders, and his feet were bare except for thin socks soaked through. He gasped for breath, chest rising and falling in panicked jerks. "Please, please help!" His voice cracked. "He's hurting my mom!" The entire diner froze. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. The truck drivers stopped talking. Even the buzzing lights seemed to quiet. Ethan was already rising from his seat. Ranger lifted his head, ears pointing forward, letting out a low, alert rumble from deep in his chest. Ethan approached the boy slowly so he wouldn't frighten him. "What's your name, buddy?" The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Oliver Hayes." His voice trembled violently. "My mom, She's still there. I ran. I had to run. Ethan knelt to eye level. Oliver's eyes were wide and wet, filled not only with fear, but with a desperation no child should ever carry. "Where is she?" Ethan asked. Oliver pointed out the fogged window toward the street buried in snow. Snowcrest Motel, room 6. He locked the door. He was hitting her again. The word again struck Ethan like a punch. His jaw tightened. Ranger rose to his feet beside him, posture straight, tail rigid. The dog sensed urgency before Ethan even spoke. "Oliver," Ethan said gently, "you did the right thing by coming here." His calm tone steadied the boy's shaking shoulders. Ethan stood, pulled a black beanie from his coat pocket, and placed it tightly on his head. Then he took Ranger's leash, though the dog hardly needed it. "Show me," Ethan said. Oliver nodded and moved quickly toward the door, as if afraid that slowing down might cost his mother another minute she didn't have. The storm outside bit at their faces. The wind cut across the street, pushing snow sideways. Ethan moved steadily despite the stiffness in his left knee. Ranger stayed close, body low, scanning every shadow. They reached the Snowcrest Motel, its sign flickering weakly in the wind. Paint peeled from the doors, and the walkway was cracked and uneven beneath a sheet of ice. Oliver stopped before room 6, breathing hard. A dim, flickering yellow glow seeped through the grimy curtains. Suddenly, Ranger's muscles tightened rigid. His ears shot upward. His chest expanded as he released a long, deep, warning bark, sharp and resonant, echoing across the frozen parking lot. Ethan's heart thudded. Something terrible was happening behind that door. And he didn't know if they were already too late. The door that shattered the winter silence. A muffled thud reverberated through the thin motel walls, followed by the choked, breaking sob of a woman. Ethan pressed his ear to the peeling wood of room 6, his jaw tightening as he listened. The cold bit into his cheeks, and snow stung his coat, but all he felt was the urgent pull of danger rising on the other side of that door. Ranger stood beside him, muscles tense. His breath formed sharp clouds in the air. His ears were pinned forward, his entire stance locked in the precise alert posture of a trained working dog. Ethan shifted his weight onto his right leg. His left knee gave its familiar throb. It didn't matter. He stepped back, braced himself, and drove his shoulder hard into the weak frame. The door burst inward with a splintering crack. Inside, the room reeked of spilled liquor, stale air, and something sour beneath it. Fear. The carpet was stained, the lamp crooked, and the curtains hanging by one ring. But Ethan noticed none of it first. He saw her. A woman lay half-curled beside the bed, one arm limp, the other reaching weakly, as if she had been trying to shield herself. She was Anna Hayes, and though Ethan had never seen her before, the resemblance to Oliver was unmistakable. Her dark brown hair, long and tangled, fell across her cheek. Her skin was pale beneath the bruises already blooming in deep purple across her face. She was slender, not from choice but from hardship, and her breaths came sharp and thin. Standing over her was Derek Collins. He was a large man in his mid-30s, with the thick neck and heavy arms of someone who spent more time lifting boxes than lifting his own conscience. His beard was patchy, unkempt, and flecked with dried sweat. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils small from alcohol. A life of anger had carved permanent lines around his mouth, tightening every expression into something cruel. He wheeled around, startled and furious. "What the hell?" The sentence didn't finish. In pure instinct, Derek swung the beer bottle in his hand, the glass glinting under the flickering ceiling bulb as it sliced through the air. Ethan moved with practiced precision. He lowered his shoulder, letting the bottle swipe past him. Ranger launched. The dog struck Derek's forearm with a disciplined, forceful bite, clean, controlled, meant to disarm, not maim. The bottle shattered against the wall, raining glass on the stained carpet. Derek shouted, stumbling back. "Ranger, off!" Ethan commanded sharply. Ranger released immediately, planting his paws firmly, chest low, tail still and rigid, a silent warning. Derek, fueled by some cocktail of rage and cheap whiskey, roared and lunged forward again. Ethan stepped into him, catching his wrist, twisting sharply until Derek dropped to his knees with a strangled cry. A quick pivot of Ethan's hip sent Derek sprawling face first into the floor. The man struggled, cursing, but Ethan pinned him, using leverage rather than brute strength. Years of SEAL training turned the moment into muscle memory. Oliver rushed into the doorway, small and trembling. "Mom! Mom!" "Stay there, Oliver," Ethan said. his calm voice steady despite the storm in the room. He tore the drawstring from his winter coat, looping it tightly around Derek's wrists. The drunk man spat curses, but no longer had the strength to fight back. Once Derek was secured, Ethan moved to Anna. She blinked slowly, her vision blurred, breath shallow. She had the delicate features of a woman who had once carried hope easily. Soft cheekbones, gentle eyes now swollen, and lips cracked from winter air and fear. Her voice trembled when she tried to speak. "Is Oliver okay?" "He's right here," Ethan said, scanning her ribs, her jawline, the bruises. "Help is on the way." Oliver dropped to her side, clutching her uninjured hand, his small body shaking. "Mom, I found someone. I found help." Anna's fingers curled weakly around his. Tears rolled silently down her temple. Outside, the storm howled through the gaps in the doorframe, dragging icy air across the floor. The wind rattled the loose window until it clattered. Ethan grabbed the motel phone, an old yellowed landline, and dialed emergency services. His voice was firm, efficient, giving details without panic. When he hung up, he scanned the room again. His gaze hardened. There were clear signs this had not been the first time Derek had lost control. Holes in the wall, broken picture frames, overturned drawers. Ethan recognized the pattern all too well, the quiet cycle of fear that trapped people until someone broke the door down. He stood, his body blocking the wind from Anna and Oliver. Ranger moved closer, lying beside Oliver so the boy could lean against his warm fur. A minute later, footsteps crunched outside. A woman's voice approached, sharp, focused. The door opened wider to reveal paramedic Julia Emerson, a tall woman in her late 30s with dark blonde hair tied in a low bun. Her uniform jacket was dusted with snow. Her face was lean, her eyes steady, the kind of eyes that had seen far too many winter accidents and quiet tragedies. She stepped into the room, scanning first Ethan, then Derek bound on the floor, then Anna. "We'll take it from here," Julia said, her voice calm but urgent. "You did right calling." Her partner, Lance Porter, followed behind. A thin, wary man with dark skin and a small mustache. He moved silently, quickly preparing a stretcher. Julia knelt beside Anna. "Ma'am, I'm Julia. We're going to get you somewhere safe." Anna's eyes fluttered open wider, full of pain and fear. Julia's tone softened. "You're safe now." Oliver didn't let go of his mother's hand. Ethan stepped aside only enough to give them space, never enough to lose sight of Derek. Outside, the wind roared. The Rockies sent another blast of frigid air, sweeping through the broken doorway. And Ethan knew this was only the beginning of a much bigger fight. Fear that hides behind quiet walls. The halls of Frost Valley Medical Center were dim, washed in soft blue light that reflected off metal railings and polished floors. Outside the wide windows, snow spiraled in restless circles. Night had settled in early, the kind of winter darkness that made even strong men feel the weight of the world pressing on their shoulders. Ethan stood near the doorway of room 214, hands tucked inside the pockets of his navy coat. He had removed his beanie, letting the cold from the hallway cling to his slightly graying temples. His expression remained calm, but the lines around his eyes deepened with every passing minute. Near the foot of the bed, Ranger lay curled but alert. The dog's tail rested against the floor, unmoving. Every few seconds, Ranger lifted his head to glance at Oliver, then at the hallway, then back again, a steady cycle of vigilance. Oliver, slumped on a vinyl chair with a thin blanket over him, had finally succumbed to exhaustion. The boy's light brown hair stuck up in uneven tufts, and his small hands remained clenched even in sleep. His breathing came in short, tired puffs, the remnants of tears still drying on his cheeks. On the hospital bed, Anna Hayes stirred. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent light and winced as the movement tugged at the bruises along her jaw. Her lips were cracked, and her long brown hair fell tangled over the pillow. There was a fragility to her, not of weakness, but of someone who had been enduring far too long. Her voice was hoarse. "Where's Oliver?" Ethan stepped closer. "Right there. He hasn't left your side." Anna turned her head slowly, relief softening her bruised features. Then fear returned, surging up like a shadow reclaiming ground. "He'll be released," she whispered. "Derek always gets released. His brother owns that place, the bail office on Crosswind Street. He told me if I ran again, it'd be the last time I ever tried." Ranger lifted his head at her trembling tone, his amber eyes gentle. Ethan kept his voice steady, grounding, the way he used to speak to fellow soldiers during long nights overseas. This time won't be like before. Anna studied him, searching for something, certainty, maybe a promise. Why are you helping us? You don't even know us. For a moment, Ethan didn't answer. Memories drifted back. The dusty courtyard overseas, the ringing thunder of an explosion, the sight of a teammate's family receiving the flag. He had seen the aftermath of violence too many times. He knew what it did to the innocent. He tightened his jaw before speaking. Because you and Oliver deserve better than this. And because he ran into that diner today with more courage than most grown men. A knock interrupted them. Sheriff Daniel Kincaid, a tall man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard, stepped in. His tan sheriff's jacket looked too thin for the cold. Outside, and despite his calm demeanor, there was a heaviness to him. A man who had worked too many domestic cases, seen too many outcomes that arrived too late. His lined forehead hinted at years spent mediating small-town troubles. Kincaid nodded respectfully to Ethan. "Walk with me a moment." Ethan followed him into the hallway, Ranger rising and padding silently behind. "What's the situation?" Ethan asked quietly. Kincaid exhaled, breath misting in the cold draft from a window. "Not good. Derek's brother already filed the paperwork. Unless a miracle drops out of the sky, he'll walk free in the morning." A muscle twitched in Ethan's jaw. Ranger sensed his shift in energy and leaned against his leg. Kincaid continued. "Derek has a record, mostly bar fights, property damage. But Anna never pressed charges before. Fear kept her from it. This time, we have enough to hurt him legally, but he's the kind that doesn't wait for court dates." Ethan frowned. "She and Oliver can't go back to that motel." "No," Kincaid said, voice low. "They can't." A soft sound came from down the hall, heels clicking. A nurse approached, carrying a clipboard pressed against her chest. Nurse Helena Brooks was a tall woman in her mid-40s with pale skin and black hair streaked with silver, tied back in a braided knot. Her eyes were a sharp ice blue, the kind that missed nothing. She had a reputation for firmness but fairness, known for speaking her mind when others hesitated. She stopped beside them. "She needs rest, Sheriff. The injuries aren't life-threatening, but the psychological damage..." Her voice trailed off before she regrouped. "She's been living in survival mode." Ethan nodded once. He didn't need the reminder. Helena added, "Oliver shouldn't stay in that chair all night. His body's exhausted, and the stress will catch up with him." "I'll move him when she wakes again," Ethan said. Kincaid studied Ethan for a long moment. "You're taking a lot on for someone you met an hour ago." Ethan met his gaze evenly. "Someone has to." The sheriff sighed, a deep, tired sound that echoed through the corridor. "This town isn't built for storms like this, Walker. We're good people, but understaffed. If Derek comes straight here after release, he won't get to them," Ethan said simply. Ranger let out a low rumble of agreement. They returned to Anna's room. She was sitting up now, her thin shoulders trembling slightly beneath the hospital gown. Oliver had woken and crawled into the bed beside her, wrapping his small arms around her waist with the fierce protectiveness only a child could muster. Anna stroked his hair with shaking fingers. Outside, snow beat against the windows with a growing rhythm, as if warning them all of what was coming. Ethan looked at the mother and son, two people who had endured too much. Ranger pressed against his leg, again, ears flicking toward the door, sensing Ethan's tension. Tomorrow, Derek would walk free, and Ethan knew, with absolute certainty, that their real battle was only just beginning. The snarling breath of Storm Valley, the storm arrived before dawn, swallowing Frost Valley beneath a wall of white. Snow whipped through the pines with a fury that rattled the cabin windows, each gust howling like something alive. The forest, usually calm and whispering, now roared with the voice of winter. Inside the small log cabin, the air smelled faintly of pine and old wood smoke. A single lantern flickered on the table, casting long shadows over the rough-hewn walls. Ethan adjusted the wick, his movement steady but strained. He hadn't slept. Not really. Not since Sheriff Kincaid called with the news at sunrise. Derek Collins had been released. Ranger lay near the front door, head up, body tense. The dog's ears twitched at every distant creak in the forest. His breath puffed slowly through his nose, forming small clouds in the cold air seeping through the cracks of the old cabin. Across the room, Anna Hayes sat on the edge of a cot, wrapped in a thick gray blanket. Her long brown hair was tied loosely at the back, and her bruises had begun to darken but not fade. Her slender shoulders trembled in the cold, and in fear she tried hard to hide. Oliver curled against her side, clutching the sleeve of her sweater. His hair was tousled, his small frame stiff as if expecting the world to break again at any moment. He asked no questions, as if he already understood the answer. Danger never stayed away for long. Ethan checked the window again. The visibility was barely a few meters. Snow swirled like ghosts, erasing the world beyond the porch. A quiet knock came at the door. Ranger instantly rose, tail stiff, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Ethan moved toward him and peered out through the peephole. Sheriff Daniel Kincaid stood hunched against the storm. Snow clung to his jacket and beard, his usually calm expression tight with concern. Ethan quickly unlatched the door and pulled him inside before the wind could tear it off its hinges. Kincaid shook off the snow. "Roads are a nightmare. We had to abandon the cruiser a mile down. My deputy's watching the road in case Derek circles back." "Did he leave town?" Ethan asked. "No." Kincaid's voice was grim. "He's heading this way." Anna's face drained of color. Oliver hid his face in her side. "We'll keep you safe," Kincaid said gently, his weathered features softening. "But Derek isn't thinking clearly. He's drunk, angry, and convinced he's been wronged." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He'll come here." "Most likely." Ranger paced to the door again, listening. A sudden whistle of wind struck the cabin. Then, another sound beneath it. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Kincaid's hand went to the holstered revolver beneath his jacket. Ethan motioned for him to wait. "Let him get close." Anna held Oliver, whispering to him, her bruised hands trembling. Ethan stepped outside first. The cold hit him like a blow. Snow pelted his face, stinging his skin. Ranger trotted beside him, fur bristling, the dog's posture lowering into a defensive stance. Through the swirling snow, a shape emerged, large, lumbering, unsteady. Derek Collins trudged along the path, clutching a metal rod, its surface gleaming even in the storm's dim light. His clothes were soaked, his face red from cold and rage. His breaths came in ragged bursts. He looked like a man running on fury alone. "Anna!" Derek roared, voice breaking against the wind. "You think you can hide from me?" Ethan took one step forward. "That's enough." Derek's eyes locked onto him, bloodshot, unhinged. "Get out of my way!" Ranger barked, a deep thunderous sound that cut through the storm. Derek flinched but tightened his grip on the rod. Ethan said nothing more. Words had reached their limit. Derek charged. Ranger lunged first, barking sharply. A final warning. Derek ignored him, swinging the metal rod toward Ethan's head. Ethan ducked, his injured left knee flaring with pain as he shifted weight, but training carried him forward. He caught Derek's wrist mid-swing, twisted sharply, then drove his shoulder into Derek's chest. The man stumbled in the snow. Ranger circled, growling, ready to intercept if Derek tried to rise, swinging again. Derek roared and grabbed for Ethan, fingers curling around his coat. Ethan stepped inside his reach, hooked an arm under Derek's elbow, and executed a clean takedown. Derek crashed onto his back, the breath knocked out of him in a cloud of white. Before Derek could recover, Ethan dropped his weight and pinned him with practiced motion, twisting the man's arm behind him. The rod fell uselessly into the snow. Kincaid arrived behind them, revolver drawn but steady. "Derek Collins," he said firmly, "you're under arrest for assault, endangerment, and trespassing with intent to harm." Derek thrashed, kicking up snow. "You can't keep me away! She's mine! She—" Ranger barked again, inches from Derek's face. This time, Derek went silent. Kincaid knelt and snapped the cuffs around Derek's wrists, tightening them securely. Snow gathered on the man's clothes as his rage simmered into exhausted defeat. Ethan rose slowly, his knee throbbing. Ranger pressed against him, sensing the pain, offering quiet stability. Snow continued to fall, blanketing Derek's form as Kincaid hauled him to his feet. This time, there would be no easy release. Anna stood on the porch, Oliver clutching her tightly, both watching with wide, tear-filled eyes. Relief washed over her bruised features. Ranger trotted over and sat at Ethan's side, chest rising steadily, eyes bright with the alert pride of a dog who knew he had done exactly what was asked of him. They had protected the right people, and the storm at last seemed to ease. When winter learned to let go, the first signs of early spring crept quietly into Frost Valley, softening the once unyielding snowdrifts into slushy patches along the sidewalks. The wind, though still sharp, no longer carried the bite that seemed able to cut through bone. Instead, It brushed past in gentler waves, as if the valley itself had decided it had punished its people long enough. Ethan Walker walked up the steps of Pineview Apartments, a modest three-story building with pale blue siding and a carved wooden sign that had lost half its paint. His boots left faint wet prints on the stairs. He knocked once, the sound echoing through the quiet hallway. The door opened almost instantly. Oliver Hayes stood there, his light brown hair sticking up in the same wild way it always did. In the month since the cabin incident, he had gained a bit of color in his cheeks and a quiet confidence in the way he moved. He wore a red sweater slightly too big for him, sleeves pushed up unevenly. "Ethan! Ranger!" Oliver's face brightened. "Mom made hot chocolate." Ranger trotted inside, tail wagging slowly, pausing only to sniff the hallway before accepting the apartment as safe. The 5-year-old German Shepherd had grown more relaxed these past weeks, though his amber eyes never lost their constant, thoughtful awareness of every sound around him. The living room was small but warm. Sunlight streamed in through sheer curtains. A second-hand sofa sat beneath a framed picture Oliver had drawn. 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, and a dog with ears too big, holding hands under falling snow. Across the top, in uneven crayon letters, were the words, "Safe now." On the kitchenette counter, Anna Hayes stirred a pot of hot chocolate. Her long brown hair was neatly brushed, and though faint traces of old bruises remained, her skin had regained warmth. She wore a soft sweater and jeans, her posture more upright than Ethan had ever seen. Healing had not erased her fragility, but it had given her space to breathe. She turned with a smile, gentle, shy, but grateful. "Good morning, Ethan." "Morning," he replied, removing his coat and draping it over the back of a chair. "Place looks nice." "We've been trying," Anna said with a small laugh. "The community has been incredible." She wasn't wrong. After the story of the motel rescue had spread, Frost Valley rallied behind her. Donations, furniture, free meals from Marlene's diner. The town, sleepy and overlooked for years, seemed to find a new sense of purpose in helping her rebuild. Oliver plopped down on the rug, and Ranger lowered himself beside the boy with a quiet grunt, stretching his paws forward. Oliver leaned against him instantly. The dog's presence always softened something inside the child. Oliver tugged gently at Ranger's harness. "He's my hero," he said proudly. Ranger turned his head, nudging Oliver's cheek with his nose. Ethan felt the familiar tightness in his chest, a mix of pride, relief, and something heavier. For years he had lived with ghosts, fallen teammates, shattered missions, the kind of memories that gnawed at a man's silence. Yet here, in this small apartment, with its mismatched furniture and crayon artwork, the weight eased. Anna poured hot chocolate into 3 mugs, one with chipped paint, one shaped like a snowman, and one new, likely donated. She handed Ethan the snowman mug. "I know you don't like fuss, but thank you for everything." Ethan shook his head lightly. "Oliver saved you. He's the one who ran for help." Anna glanced at her son, eyes softening. "He's braver than he knows." Oliver looked up. "Ranger saved her too. And you." Ethan couldn't help but smile, though he hid it behind the mug. A knock sounded at the door. Ranger immediately stood, posture alert but not aggressive. Anna opened it to reveal Mrs. Caldwell, an elderly neighbor with white hair pulled into a bun and a small frame wrapped in a pink knitted shawl. She had kind eyes and a habit of worrying over everyone in the building. She held a basket of bread rolls. "Just checking in, dear. The church had extras." Anna thanked her warmly and invited her inside, but Mrs. Caldwell insisted she had errands. Before leaving, she leaned toward Ethan. "You keep looking out for them, all right?" He nodded once. "Always." After she left, Ethan helped Oliver assemble a small bookshelf donated by a local carpenter. The boy chatted nonstop about school, his new friends, and how Ranger had saved him from a scary snowman decoration at the grocery store. Ranger, lying nearby, accepted all the credit with regal calm. Later, as the afternoon sun dipped behind the mountains, the room glowed golden. Anna sat by the fireplace while Oliver read a storybook aloud, stumbling over longer words, but determined to get them right. Ranger rested his head on the boy's lap, eyes half closed. Ethan sat back in the armchair, watching the quiet scene unfold. The flickering fire reflected in Ranger's amber eyes, casting warm light across the dog's black and tan fur. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt the edges of his old pain loosen. The ghosts didn't disappear. Ghosts rarely did, but they stepped back, making space for something gentler. Anna looked over at him, her expression soft. "I don't know what we would have done without you and Ranger." Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the child leaning against the dog, at the woman slowly reclaiming her life, at the room filled with warmth instead of fear. "There are things worth standing up for," he said quietly. The snow outside melted in slow, dripping streams down the window. Winter hadn't fully left, but its grip had loosened. In that modest apartment, 3 lives, once fractured in different ways, had found their way towards safety, healing, and something like a new beginning. A soldier, a dog, and a brave child had saved each other in the harshest season of Colorado. And now, at last, winter was learning to let go. In our everyday lives, we rarely notice that small miracles are still unfolding around us. God does not always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends a weary veteran who still carries the weight of old battles, a loyal dog who understands a frightened child's heartbeat, or a little boy brave enough to run for help at the exact moment hope seems lost. There are days when winter feels endless, when the cold settles into our hearts as much as it does into the world outside. But even then, God quietly opens another door. He places the right people in our path, people who step forward with kindness just when life feels heaviest. Just as Ethan, Ranger, and Oliver found one another in the harshest season of Frost Valley. If today you are facing something difficult, remember this: God sees you. He sees the fear you hide, the wounds you carry, and he is already preparing someone or something to lift you up when you think you cannot take another step. Share this story with someone who might need a little warmth tonight. Leave a comment if you believe that compassion can still change a life. And if you want more stories of hope, courage, and the quiet miracles God places in our days, don't forget to subscribe. May God bless you and your family, protect your steps, calm your storms, and fill your days with the small miracles you haven't seen yet.